Hi friends, welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily news. So CPI data is out. Let's take a look at the headlines and see what's going on with this. U.S. inflation report suggests Fed rate pause will become a full stop. These kind of things, predicting what the Fed's going to do exactly is always tricky. However, yes, most of the people out there on the market are saying that the Fed's going to pause tomorrow. However, come July, I'd say maybe a 50-50 chance that they'll either pause or raise rates. There's not going to be any cutting at all. Maybe at the end of the year, you'd be looking at something like that. Take a look at headlines as well. CPI report shows inflation has been cut in half from last year's peak. So definitely things are going down. I'm going to show you the charts in a minute, and you'll be able to see exactly sort of where it's going. And then you also have pace of U.S. inflation eases to slowest in 2 years. Look at the actual numbers in the chart. Core CPI came in at 5.3. Overall inflation, overall CPI is at 4%. Now, what does this mean in terms of the projections and sort of what people were expecting? They say core CPI again is at 4%. The median estimate was 4.1, so it's a little bit cooler than was estimated. However, the core CPI came in at 5.3. The median estimate was 5.2, so a little bit hotter than expected, and that's core CPI. And you can actually see it in the chart as well. So if you look at the peak here, was this I think that was like June or something like that. Last year, and it has come down. That's your CPI. However, your core CPI is fairly constant. Yes, it's cooling off, but you can see it is a much different trajectory, not just like a clear spike down. I think this has a lot to do with energy and food being really volatile, and was peaking at one point. It's definitely come down. But again, the core CPI is sort of the problem for the Fed, and they want like a 2% projection or 2%, I should say, inflation year over year, which is tough to get because we're still well over what they want. Now, if you take a look at the actual charts here, you can see a breakdown by category, which is really interesting. And the ones that really jump out to me, if you look at the top here, it's a car repair, or they say motor vehicle repair, or car insurance, or another way to call it is motor vehicle insurance. So I guess vehicle repair is inflation is like 19.7%. And then you have motor vehicle insurance or car insurance at 17.1%. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this one. Have you noticed that your car insurance and basically fixing your car has jumped up in cost? Now, on the reverse chart, or the reverse perspective here, health insurance is down 20%, which is really interesting. And then gasoline is also down 20%. And then you have airline fare down 13%. The thing with this stuff, though, which I question a bit, even though things are down, say health insurance, I still think it's really, really expensive. I was just talking to people on the plane flying out to Korea, and like the amounts that you guys pay for health insurance is like ludicrous. It's like well over $1,000. It depends who you ask. Maybe it'd be like $500 or $600. Depends on your family situation, etc. But it's a lot. And I can just tell you, here in Korea, we pay like 1/5 of what you guys pay. So it's like, whoa, it just seems like too much. But it is what it is. It's living in the USA. And ice cream is still up 8%, because we do track the ice cream on this channel, so that certainly matters. And then you have things like primary rent of primary residence is up 8.7%. So there's certainly things that are high, and some things are coming down. TVs are down, for example, 11%. And one of the things that I mentioned with this stuff is it always depends on where you live, your own situation, these kind of things. And I say it several times, if you have lost your job, you're definitely struggling right now, or are your employer, are they giving you a raise that is like sort of comparable to what inflation is? So for example, and I mentioned this before, I was in the USA, and I was just shocked at like food costs. It just seemed like everything was $20, and you add tax and tip, you're like at 25 per person or more. And it's just like, oh my God. And you're not even talking about great quality for the kind of food that, the price that you're paying. It seemed ludicrous. So to me, even though inflation is cooling, it just seemed like things are really expensive. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that, if you agree or disagree with that, if you feel like, things are still high where you live. Now, it depends on region. So evidently, according to this, you got the Southeast, so like your Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, these kind of places. Inflation is still high. And then you have your sort of, I guess you call these the mid-mountain states, Montana's, Arizona, New Mexico's up. And then inflation is cooled, I guess, in the Midwest and then the Northeast, et cetera. So you can kind of see it depends on where you live. If you look more particularly, there are certain cities that really stand out where inflation has come down. So evidently, I guess inflation was spiking in Minneapolis, but this is the one that really came down the most. So it's like Minneapolis, St. Paul, Riverside, that would be east of LA, has come down quite a bit. So potentially prices, stuff like that. And then LA is cool, Dallas, Boston, DC is cooled, and then you also have like New York and Tampa. So I think these are the ones that essentially had peaked, and so they had the most to fall. If you want to take a look at bond yields, and I always mention this stuff because I know it's more sexy and more cool to talk about, individual stocks and things like that, because essentially, these things, any given day may go up 10%, down 20%, depending on which thing you're in. But if you do want to play it safe and you want those sort of guaranteed way to build wealth, bonds aren't bad. The 12-month is over 5, the 6 months is over 5, and the 3 months is over 5. And then you're looking at the 2-year and the 5-year both over 4%. So do keep an eye on this stuff. And essentially you want to have a different mix of, various asset classes. If you're looking at housing, this is sort of rents. And I mentioned sort of like, are things expensive or not? It depends on where you live. So you can see here, asking rents fall in the West 2%, but rise in the Northeast and Midwest 5%. So I think what you're seeing is essentially people are moving out of the more expensive, housing markets, and with work from home, you can actually live, in a cheaper market. So you can go from a New York and you can, like, say, for example, move to an Iowa, or you can go from LA, or, example, move to an Indiana. You get my point. You can move to the middle if you want, because you are, work from home, so you can live anywhere essentially. And this is actually really interesting where rents are actually coming down. You guys can see this. It says here negative 0.6%, and this is the most recent reading as of let's say May 23. However, as I mentioned to you guys before, where even though yes, things are cooling off, I still think things are elevated. If you ask people sort of what they're paying in rent, the typical asking rent was $1,995, right? So that's the median rent. It also depends on where you're talking about. So in the Northeast, right? Talking about the U.S. here, rent's like basically $2,500. You can see right here, that's your median. In the West, it's $2,400, and it's actually really quite interesting how different the regions are. You go to the South, it's more like your $1,600, and you go in the Midwest, it's more like $1,400. So there's major differences in cost of living on where you are. And that's why I always say, guys, I'd love to hear from your thoughts on these things when I ask, do you feel like, even though, yes, the numbers of inflation are cooling, what do you think about your wages compared to your cost of things? Because I do think the price of yourself, it does really depend on where you live. If you're in the market to buy a house, mortgages are still at 7%. Around, and what's going on with prices. So prices are definitely coming down. You guys can see this here, but we're sort of like leveling off. So it's not like, suddenly everything is really, really cheap. It's not like that. So here, the median sale price is still around $350. And I'd love to hear, and that's why I was asking you guys, part of the community, sort of like, does that sound about right in your neck of the woods? And everything depends on where you are. If you take a look at this is also interesting as well. How much are people paying on their mortgage? Essentially, housing payments are up 13%, and that's year over year. And the reason why, we talk about, we just showed a chart before, like your rents are up, was it 8.7%, and then you have your mortgages up basically 13.7%. And the average person, I think your average pay raise is like, say, 3 to 4%, something like that. I'd love to hear if any of you, say got a 13% pay raise to keep up with your mortgage, because I think these things are definitely matter. Because I think you see where I'm going with this is that, if this is a large chunk of essentially your household income goes to paying where you live, your residence, and that's increasing, by this amount, is your pay keeping up? That's what I'm getting at. If I tell you as well that the dollar is sinking, this is something that we watch all the time, because I'm here in Korea. It's at a 3-week low, and it's probably, let's be frank, it's probably the most important chart to us, because we're always watching this one, because the dollar is really, really volatile. So if you take a look at from 2021 to I think it was like last year, I want to say around maybe November, something like that. This is the dollar, the won. It peaked at like 1440, which is like ludicrously high. So it's currently at 1270, and you can see it's been a bit volatile, which is pretty crazy considering. And a lot of this has to do with sort of like, what are people projecting that the Fed is up to? Also, what are other central banks around the world doing as well? Now, our clown stock market is still around. Crypto is cooling off, as you guys know. We talk about this, crypto bans, etc. But evidently, GameStop was up today, like 11%. They recently fired their CEO, and I think the stock went down 20%. And then whoever this person is, he's like a meme stock kind of person. The executive chair, Ryan Cohen, he bought $10 million worth of shares, and that thing is rallying. So I show these things because sometimes stocks don't always follow fundamentals. It just depends on if it's popular on Reddit. But do be careful with this stuff because at any moment the rug could come out. Other big news today, I guess Trump has been arrested in Miami court. You guys can see this. You guys know he's under charges over the document stuff regarding Mars-Largo. I personally just want Trump and Biden just to go away and quit reading about this stuff. But it is a major story, and you got to cover it because this is a big deal, to be really frank. The most telling thing for me is that he can't hire new lawyers. You can see here, Trump finds no new lawyers for court appearance in Mar-a-Lago case. And it was just reported recently that after the sort of the charges were unsealed, his lawyers quit. So I think that pretty much tells the full story, and this is something that I always focus on with you guys. If you want to cut through the BS of anything in news, just look for facts, right? I don't care what Trump says. I don't care what his opponents say. I don't care what his allies say. What I do care about is like his lawyers quit and he's been having to try to hire new ones and no one take it. I was reading through it and I guess they're looking for like a specialist who's, like an expert, I'm talking about a legal expert in, classified document cases, and like no one wants to take the case and his lawyers quit. So that to me is really, really telling. So anyway, this has been your daily news. Love to hear your thoughts on inflation. As I mentioned to you guys before, do you think things are still expensive where you are, or do you feel like your wages have caught up and maybe I'm wrong and maybe, depending on what industry you're in, you're doing great. For example, if you are in motor vehicle repair, you're up 20%, you're doing awesome. So anyway, thanks again for your time and I'll catch you in the next video.